it's a pleasure to have all of these four knowledgeable individuals here. The way we're going to work it is that Rodney will go first, followed by Chris, followed by Richard, and then followed by Margie. I did forget to mention that Margie has both the CAE and the RCE designations. I'm sorry about that. And then we'll take questions at the end. This is being taped, so if you have a question, please go to the middle aisle and state your name, as well as make sure you use the microphone, and I'm told the mics are on. With that, Rodney, would you like to come up here and talk about how we got here?
Thanks, Patrick. Good morning. Welcome to the earliest session at the Institute, apart from your continental breakfast. All right, I've been asked to talk about the policy aspects to the Code of Ethics training requirement. There's no better way to do that than to start from the beginning. How did we get here? Where did this come from? For that, we travel back to 1997 to a group called the COE PAG. We like our acronyms. COE stands for Code of Ethics Enforcement Presidential Advisory Group. This group came up with 16 recommendations that at the time were pretty groundbreaking. They changed the way we handled and associations looked at professional standards. Things like every association needing a certified professional standards administrator. We all know that one, right? That came from the COE PAG. The fact that every association has to be part of a regional professional standards agreement with at least one other association, that came from the COE PAG. The ability of associations at their discretion to post and publish the names of code violators, that came from the COE PAG. And there are a number of other things. If you're interested in that or any of those things sound new to you, you might want to check out the report, and I'll tell you a website where you can find that information. So the COE PAG, one of their objectives, one of their goals was to position realtors to understand and act in conformance with the Code of Ethics. You see, the COE PAG determined that realtors violated the Code of Ethics for one reason being that they simply didn't know any better. That for some members, believe it or not, they didn't realize we had a Code of Ethics. That sound familiar? So the COE PAG determined that once someone violated the Code of Ethics, they rarely did so again. They had a heightened awareness of the code. So the group wanted to create that same level of awareness, and that's where they came up with this requirement. As such, all realtors are now required to take 2.5 hours of ethics training within 4-year cycles. Not 4 years from when they last took it, but 4-year cycles, windows, during any time they can take that training. The current cycle we're in started in January 2009, and it will end December 31st, 2012, this year. A member can take their training anywhere in that cycle. The training taken must meet specific learning objectives and criteria. The criteria, for the most part, is it has to be 2.5 hours long, and it has to be taken within that cycle. Now, if it's not a live classroom course, but it's distance learning, you also have to have some type of test. But if it's a classroom course, you don't even have to offer it. You don't even have to require a test. So let's talk a little bit about the learning objectives. There are 4 mandatory learning objectives. The first one is the course has to identify at least 2 of the aspirational articles to the preamble. We know what the preamble is, right? That's the beginning to the Code of Ethics, things where it talks about underneath all is the land, do unto others as you would do unto yourself, things like that. You also have to identify how the code is different from general business ethics. The next objective is you have to cover at least 2 articles in the 17 articles of the Code of Ethics, just 2. Of those 2, the third learning objective requires that you cover possible violations of one of those 2 articles. And the last objective is you have to briefly describe the association's professional standards enforcement process, ethics complaints, arbitration requests. That's it. Those are the 4 mandatory learning objectives. You can see that it's somewhat easy to build a course around those. And the group did that purposefully. Other important things that you need to know. Training can be accomplished in many different ways, whether it's a webinar, video, classroom course, online training. There is no limitation in the format that the training can be offered in. Also, all completion must be recorded in NRDS. This wasn't a requirement during the first cycle. During the first cycle, association executives if they had a member who held membership somewhere else and they took their training at another association, didn't have one centralized location where they could go and determine if that member had completed their training or not. That was a problem during the first cycle. And the Association Executive Committee had a work group after the first cycle that came up with the requirement and was then subsequently passed by the NAR Professional Standards Committee that all completion must be recorded in NRDS. And Chris is here and she's going to tell you more about the importance of that and how you go about doing it. Each association determines if the training taken meets the required learning objectives and criteria. Now, obviously, putting on your own course, you're going to develop a course that meets the criteria and learning objectives. If you have another association of realtors that is putting on a course, you can take comfort in the fact that they understand what the learning objectives and criteria are. If you're talking about some other outside training facility, you can determine how in-depth you want to determine if that course meets the learning objectives and criteria. If there is a question whether that course meets the learning objectives and criteria, you should work with that outside training facility. Give them the information about the learning objectives and criteria. Let's make this as easy as we can for members to take training, give them as many opportunities to take training as possible. Now, what if members don't finish their training? What if they don't take training by the deadline? Come December 31st of this year, if a member doesn't complete their training, they are subsequently suspended. And there's a field within NRDS that Chris will tell you about how to reflect that suspension. During that suspension, they're still realtors. They still have to pay dues. They simply have to satisfy their ethics training requirement. During that suspension, they'll still have access to Realtor.org so they can satisfy that requirement. Come March 31st or March 1st, if they haven't satisfied their training still, they are automatically terminated. On Realtor.org, there's a dedicated webpage with a lot of information about ethics training. You can't read it that good. It's Realtor.org/COE training. Realtor.org/COE training. I checked this morning. The AE toolkit isn't posted to this page. It is on Realtor.org, and we're going to have it cross-referenced on this page. But as of this morning, it wasn't. I think that'll happen sometime this afternoon. But the AE Toolkit is a resource that was developed just last year for the ethics training requirement, geared specifically towards association executives. On the toolkit, you'll find information about the background to this requirement. You'll find information about the administration, about the enforcement of it. You'll also find information about how to market the requirement and communicate it with your members. And lastly, you'll find other training resources available. The toolkit is really nice for association executives because it's geared towards you. It speaks in a language and it points out the importance of different resources to you as an association executive in having to deal with this. You'll also find on this page NAR's online courses. We have 2 free online courses available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. One of the courses is the ethics orientation course for new members. The other one is the course for existing members. The existing member course has 2 tracks, one for residential members, one for commercial members. The nice thing about NAR's online courses is that it automatically reports to NRDS. So from an administrative side, for an association, there's really nothing you need to do. If your members take NAR's online training, you're not going to be involved in all. Training materials. On this webpage, you'll also find NAR's developed a canned course for you. If you want to conduct a classroom course, we give you everything from the participant guide, the facilitator manual, test, PowerPoint. We even give you certificates, sample certificates that you can customize for your local association. And also there's a resource here, the PSTM resource database, that stands for Professional Standards Training and Mediating Resource Database. Here you'll find a list of instructors. If you don't know where to find an instructor for the course, you can find over 100 instructors here and what the references are, what stuff they'll teach, their contact information. Lastly, on this page you'll find, in addition to other things, but these are sort of the big ones that I pulled out for you, is the NAR Code of Ethics video series. These are 15 vignettes that we did probably 5 years ago, but still very applicable, still a great resource. They go over each of the articles in the Code of Ethics and break it out in a real simple, easy to understand language. The videos themselves, as a standalone resource, do not meet the ethics training requirements, but it's a great thing to accompany a classroom course if you want to break up lecture and stuff like that. So what you should be doing locally. Right now, you should be reminding your members that they have to take training and do it often. Oops, sorry. Number 2, you should be offering additional ethics courses if you can. And if you can't do additional ethics courses, helping your members understand where they can take their training. If you can create incentives for your members to take training early, do that. When we had the work group, one of the incentives some local associations did was they offered discounts if training was taken earlier in the year rather than later in the year. At NAR, we're going to be doing some incentives to try and get members to take their training early. And lastly, link to NAR's online course. It's the simplest way for your members to complete the requirement. During the last cycle, we had a countdown clock. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that. It was on Realtor.org, and it would just tick away at how many minutes, hours, seconds they had left to take their training. I think some members were just sitting there waiting it to get as close as it could to the deadline for them to start. But you can take that countdown clock, and we'll give you the coding for that, and you can put it on your own local association website. The nice thing about that is your members are more familiar with your website than they are Realtor.org. From your website, if they click on that clock, it will take them directly to NAR's online course. So a great way for your members to find out about training, be aware and understand the deadline, and be able to access NAR's online course. And that concludes my comments. I look forward to getting your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Chris, are you going? Chris is next. A little tight up here.
Thank you. As Rodney mentioned, after the first cycle of the Code of Ethics training, the AE committee approved the motion that every point of entry was responsible for updating the information in NERD. So that's what I'm going to talk about, along with some new reports we have coming out in a couple of weeks to help you with tracking this information. Now, as Rodney mentioned, there is a course on Realtor.org for the Code of Ethics, and if your members take it online, it will automatically update NERDs for you. So if you're looking to save some time, send them off to Realtor.org, and it will do that job for you. So just to give you an idea, and you can obviously update your NERDS records through your own association system, but I've just grabbed the screens off of NERDS itself to give you an idea. So if I pull up a member, and I know it's a little hard to see some of these links, there is a link called Add Education. And everyone will see that because the idea was that any point of entry can add an education course for a member in NERDS. The education record existed before the Code of Ethics training, so it also holds education such as folks' certification courses, the institutes. We're going to use it at one point to track their education courses as well. So the idea was perhaps if there's a member who's visiting Fairbanks, Alaska, and they're from Houston, and they've just realized it's December 30th, and yay, Fairbanks has a Code of Ethics course, and they want to attend it, and they're disorganized, which is why they're in Fairbanks in December, but yeah. Fairbanks has access to that member, even though, let's say, their primary association is Houston, so you will all see that link to Add Education. Again, the education record existed before Code of Ethics, so there's a lot of fields in it because it was intended to track all sorts of education, but if what you're doing is putting in the Code of Ethics, there's only a few fields that you need to worry about. And it's fairly simple, the information that you would enter. Group code is required, and you always use BPP because it was board policy that came up with this idea. The course code, COEC, and the course number is the most important field to pay attention to. There is a guideline for that, and you'll see why that's important when we take a look at how other associations can view this information, how members can view this information, and the new reports coming out. The guideline for the course number is it should always be the year they took it, followed by the cycle. Right now, we're in cycle 3. That's the one that runs 2009 through 2012. So if that member took the course in 2011, the course number would be 2011 C3. If they take it this year, 2012 C3. And next year, when we start cycle 4, 2013 C4, etc. We also ask that you fill in the course completion date again, so other associations and the member themselves can be reminded when they took the course. And the other field there, the one called sponsoring entity, is for the association who's entering the information to put their association ID. So again, that Houston member is in Fairbanks in December. Fairbanks adds this record. Fairbanks would put their association ID in that field. Now, we also mentioned if a member takes the course at Realtor.org, Realtor.org will add that record for you to NRDS, so you don't need to worry about it. And NRDS will also tell you that it's done so. As a point of entry, or your membership folks are familiar with a report that comes out every morning called the NRDS Daily Changes Report. And this report always informs you of what others have been up to in your NRDS records. REBAC added the ABR designation. Another association flagged your member as secondary, etc. There is a section on that report under education called ads, and that will show you from the day before what, if any, Code of Ethics courses Realtor.org added to NRDS. So you'll see the member's name, the course code, and when you see it was done by National Association of Realtors, that means it came from Realtor.org. So keep your eye on that report, and that's the way that NRDS informs you. Realtor.org has added those courses. Now, as I mentioned, when the AE committee approved that motion that every point of entry must put the Code of Ethics into NRDS, one of the reasons was obviously it helps that members association keep track of the course they've taken if they've taken it somewhere else. But it's also a great way for associations to check that out when a member comes knocking at your door to either transfer their primary membership or join your board as a secondary. You ask the member, hey, did you take the Code of Ethics? Well, maybe, I'm not sure, but it's a great way to check. So here I've pulled up a member, Richard Mendenhall. I'm not his point of entry, so I'm not going to see an add link or a change link, but I will see the display education link if Richard has education courses. So you can pull up any member in the country and click that link, and it will show you any and all of Richard's education courses. So again, if we're consistent throughout the country with that course number, and I see 2010 C3, oh, great, okay, Richard, yes, I can see that you met the requirement for this cycle. The other reason we want this in NRDS and we want to be consistent with the information is the member themselves can check this out, because, you know, the members get very busy and they might forget whether or not they met the requirement for this cycle. So when a member is on Realtor.org, up at the top is a link called My Account. And this is where they do their newsletter subscriptions, change their password, etc. But on this screen, they will see a link where they can change or view or update their profile on Realtor.org, which we call NRDS. So when the member clicks that and it brings them to their actual member record, there is a link at the top where they can click to display their education information. So any information in that NRDS education record can be viewed by the member. So if the member clicks that link, they'll see the whole list. And they'll see everything, including, you know, the certification courses also that sit there like SFR, AHWD, etc. And we even have some text at the top that explains to the member that this information is updated by their local association, and if they need any help interpreting it, they need to contact their local association. So for those associations who, for the Code of Ethics course number, have been using X22-13D, you know, this, again, the member won't be sure what that means. They'll be contacting you, so just keep in mind that members can view this information as well, so you want to make sure it's consistent. Now, one of the things that we've done with my group over the last almost 4 years now of this cycle and even before, we would often get calls from our POEs. Chris, can you tell me any way of the members who have the Code of Ethics or the members who don't have the Code of Ethics? Now, the best we could do is walk you through creating a batch refresh from NERDS, dumping it in Excel, and then reading through it. Because we don't know what course numbers have been used. And you would have to read through that, and if you don't see Bob Smith, you could go, okay, so Bob Smith isn't here. So what we decided instead is we had our programmers put together some really neat reports, and they're due out the end of the first week in April. And on the point of entry menu, you know, when you're at the main admin menu where you see the link to view daily changes or bring up the user manual, you're going to see a link called Code of Ethics Reports. And again, it's a little hard to read from there, but basically you'll have two choices: all my members with or all my members without. Which cycle? We only have one right now, cycle 3, but it's a drop-down box, so as the years go on, the other cycles will be there. If I am a local point of entry for more than one association, and I always use Atlanta as an example, their point of entry for Atlanta, Atlanta Commercial, the Bartow Board, and a few others I can't remember at the moment, they will have a drop-down box to pick the association. But if you're the Portland Metro Association in Oregon, you're only POE for one board, that will be the only one there. So I would select what I'm looking for, members with or without, and by that we mean Realtor Associates, because those are the ones who must meet this requirement, whose status is active, provisional, or suspended. So the system will grab those folks, and you can either run this as a report and pull it up on your screen, print it, PDF it, or you can save it as a CSV file so you can open it in Excel. And what you'll see, here's an example of members without. So it has looked at your active, provisional, suspended, Realtor Associates education record. And if it can't find one where the course number contains C3, they'll be on the without report. So if you have been recording your Cycle 3 courses with course number X223J, they will be on the without report. So again, the importance of making sure you use the correct course number. And you'll see their NERDS ID, first name, last name, real estate license number, status, office, and their email address. And the reason we did this is if I ran this and saved it as a CSV, I could take that column of email addresses, dump it in an email group, and send it out and say, hello, you haven't taken your Code of Ethics course. The members with report, same fields, NERDS ID, name, license, office, but we will also show you for them the course number and the course completion date. So I can see why these folks ended up on the with report. Look at there, they all have a course number that contains C3. Now the one type of member that will not be on either the with or without report are your new members. So any member who joined within Cycle 3 obviously could not have become a member unless they took that Code of Ethics orientation for new members. That satisfies the requirement within that cycle, so they're neither here nor there. So both reports will make sure it eliminates anyone whose join date in NERDS falls within that cycle, because those folks you don't need to worry about. So again, as I said, these reports, we're beta testing them now, and by the end of the first week in April, they'll be on the menu, and we'll certainly send an announcement out shortly before then to all of our POEs. And then finally, Rodney mentioned this as well, come January 1st, any of your Realtor Associates who did not take this requirement, you need to change their status in NERDS to S, suspended. It's an NAR status that simply means didn't take their Code of Ethics requirement. And what happens when you change their status is when we're running reports to determine dues owed by your board, we still include them because they do owe dues. And as Rodney mentioned, they can still log into Realtor.org. The idea being, please get in there and take that course. Also, there's no other privileges for the people with a status S. Now, they're only status S for 2 months. I'm not sure if that really would affect their magazine mailing or other goodies, et cetera, but we do back them out of our active count. And then finally, by March 1st, you need to either change those folks back to active in NERDS because, yay, they took the Code of Ethics course, or change the status to terminated. That way, when other associations do find a member, because John Smith has suddenly shown up on their doorstep come, April, you see that terminated, and that's your red flag to go, wait, we need to contact the previous association and see what's going on with the Code of Ethics requirement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Richard's going to talk about the local areas of enforcement and concerns. Richard?
The fun stuff. I have to admit, when Cindy called me up and asked if I'd be willing to do this, I assumed it was going to be 7:30 at night at the Bourbon Bar. Got a feeling like about 7:30 tonight there'll be about 100 people wondering where the training is over in the other tower at the Bourbon Bar. Excuse me. Does anybody know how many of your members still have not taken the training? How many? 783. She's exact right to the person. That's great. Anybody else? Clock is ticking. In the back. A couple thousand. I was going to try to show off. I've got 3,000 and change that I've got to try to get through training before, well, hopefully before December 31st, so I don't have to suspend them. And how do you think we accomplish that? First off, I think we're all familiar with the less is more concept. Well, forget about that concept. More is more. We have to communicate with them in every single format possible. I was at a seminar yesterday with Rick Harris, and he shared the same observation that's true in my area of New York. Half of my membership, and we've got about 8,000, almost 9,000 members, do not do one transaction a year. They don't do one transaction a year. So if our primary communication vehicle is email, and they're getting an email from their local association, and they don't do one transaction a year, what do you think the likelihood is of them opening up that email? It's probably fairly slim. So even though I'm a big advocate for as much electronic communication as we can possibly achieve, we even have to consider doing snail mail with these folks who really don't know what the role of the association is because they don't really do that much business. So my suggestion to you is you've got to be as creative as possible. As Rodney said, you've got to start early. I know we're kind of in the last lap of the race right now, but certainly when we look at what used to be known as quadrennial ethics training, it's like the artist formerly known as Prince, we start at January, actually we try to start March 1st. We try to get, spend those first 2 months at the beginning of the cycle trying to clean up those folks who still haven't taken it. But then we make a big push to try to make this as painless as possible. And we actually do get about a third of the membership who take it in that first year and a half because they want to get it over with. And we want to continue to build up that cycle and that culture. You also want to consider offering it in as many different formats as possible. I would strongly suggest you make it as entertaining as possible. How many of your states have continuing education required for continuing of licensure? I don't think this is a new trick. I think we've all learned this one now that we're in our 11 years of enforcing this. But certainly try to get your continuing education approved for these courses. We do it both with the orientation program, which is primarily devoted to ethics, as well as with the quadrennial ethics training, or mandatory ethics training. And we have a great success rate when we package it as part of the continuing education program. We also offer it at least twice a month. Now, one thing, though, that we always have to make sure we're doing when we're offering it that frequently is you want to make sure your instructors understand what the curriculum is and that they're sticking with the curriculum. Sometimes we can have creative instructors who are going to talk about their personal experiences for 2.5 or 3 hours, and you don't want to have that happen. You've got to make sure that your instructors are sticking with the curriculum. You want to make it interesting. What we've done, quite frankly, is we've involved Realtor members to do skits that demonstrate unethical conduct. We inject humor, and when you do that, it actually does make it a fun experience, as opposed to if you have 2.5 hours of lecture-style classroom training. The other thing is, even though we try to promote the classroom training as much as we can, the reality is, especially with that half of the membership who don't do one deal a year, they are going to really prefer to take it online. What we did with our association is we actually came up with our own video. About 4 years ago, we invested the money to come up with our own 3-hour video because our continuing ed cycles tend to be in 3-hour chunks. And it was a big success. But what we also did is we do not charge for it. If they're not taking it for continuing ed, we do not charge for it. Now, I know this is a fairly expensive proposition, especially for those associations who don't have a lot of resources, but we made the conscious decision that if we're going to get our members, over almost 9,000 members, through that training every 4 years, we have to make it as easy for them as possible. So if they're not taking it for continuing ed, we don't charge for it. Even if they are taking it for continuing education, we make it very inexpensive. And what we will now do for the balance of this year, we will be sending out weekly emails to those members with a link to not just our video actually, but also to NAR's homepage to give them the choice as to what video they want to take. We have religiously been putting the education courses into NERDS. One of the challenges I think we have is we have many members who take their education requirement from other sources. It's a challenge because they think that somehow through osmosis that record is going to get to us or to NERDS. And we have to also explain to them, no, they've got to tell us and provide us with the proof as well as the content of the course that they took from that outside vendor to make sure that it meets the learning criteria for us to actually then enter the education record in NERDS to send it up. But it's very important that you have that conversation because even if you're reminding them, they think they've taken it, perhaps they indeed have taken it, but they haven't given the local association the proof that we need in order to enter the record in NERDS. So you've got to educate your members concerning that requirement. But the bottom line is the Realtors have expressed a commitment to training in the Code of Ethics. They view it as a very important value of membership. As association execs, it doesn't make any difference if we agree with them or not. It doesn't make any difference if our life is made more difficult. We have to achieve that goal, which means we have to comply with those requirements of entering the records into NERDS, offering as many educational opportunities in as many different formats as possible, and when the time comes, putting those suspension codes in and ultimately putting those termination codes in. I mean, that is what our job is, whether we like it or not. So the more we can get that done early and the more consistently we do it, the better off we're all going to be. Thank you very much.
And finally, from the state perspective, Margie Grant from the Florida Association of Realtors. Margie?
So a good way to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning is your last speaker with an Esquire after her name, which is never a good idea. There is a space behind this podium of about this much. And I just stood up in high heels and thought, oh my. I have to walk between here and there and basically make sure neither me or Patrick falls down. So a little round of applause that neither of us just fell down. So there you go. When I was asked to chat with all of you this morning, I had the opportunity to think about my experience in the last basically 3 cycles in terms of how we did this. I arrived in the Realtor Association during the first cycle and watched all of the local associations in the state I worked with sort of look at each other and say, how exactly are we going to do this? And I will share with you that in the second cycle, in the last year of the cycle, especially broaching toward the fall, we were all saying the same things. How are we going to do this? Because you look at that deadline and you just think, there is so much more at stake here than just meeting a requirement. This is our membership, and this is us explaining to people who we probably don't have a lot of contact with that they've been suspended because of a requirement that they didn't even know existed. So one thing I want to share with you that a lot of local associations have shared with me as I've worked with them to help implement this requirement, this is actually a huge opportunity for you. Because for local associations, we have that core group of members. A lot of times they're one specific broker, a lot of times they're a leader, but there's probably about, I would say sometimes between 10 and 20% of your membership that you know, and you know them well. The other 80% you don't know as well. They're paying active, in good standing members, but we don't hear from them as much. They're not at the board as much. But these are the folks that we have to reach the most in terms of meeting this requirement. On the state level, in the 2 states that I've worked in, we've always looked at this as a partnership. And I know that some folks in local associations in other states feel that the state doesn't have a role. And technically, we don't. Technically, the state association does not have any kind of enforcement. However, every state association and every one of my colleagues across the country appreciate that if not for your efforts, we are going to suffer as much as you are, because we are going to be in the same situation of having members who are going to be suspended or terminated because they failed to hit this requirement. So from a state level, I have always looked at this requirement as something that we all have to participate in. A couple of things I want to share with you this morning is there are actually 3 things that I will share with you I don't think a lot of people know with regard to this requirement. Rodney had it on one of his slides, and the first one is your ability to recognize alternative courses that will meet the requirement. Most people, when you think of a 2.5-hour Code of Ethics course, I immediately go in my head to a continuing education class. It's usually a very specific course. You're going to hire an instructor is going to come in, or maybe it will be a volunteer member. Members are going to come to the board, and they're going to complete this class. NAR launched the online class. That was an amazing resource for our members, and it was such an opportunity for local associations to say, another opportunity for you to meet this requirement. How many of you ran into a small problem at the end of the last cycle with the online course? What was the problem? What happened? Oh my goodness gracious, all of the members who hadn't taken it all went at the same time. That was a very long week. And we all sat on the phone with folks saying, no, you will be able to get in, you just have to understand that you and 30,000 of your closest friends have all hit a website at the same time. So clearly, that's going to be a challenge. And that would be a challenge for any website, not just Realtor.org. So it wasn't the course's fault. I will share with you, it was probably our fault, because we all pushed folks and said, oh, here's this second example. Well, in chatting with AEs as we've moved into the last year of this cycle, I've asked them about, well, what are you promoting and what are you offering your members? Most of them tell me, and I will share with you the exact same things. Well, we're holding a weekly course. We're holding a monthly course. We're driving them to the online site. And a few of them, I said, well, how's it going? And a couple of you had some really big numbers of people who haven't met it yet. I will share with you that one of the local associations in Florida, the state association produced a DVD. We did the same thing New York did, and we actually just did a brand new one for the 3rd cycle to make sure that we kept it fresh and exciting, and we had it actually professionally produced to make sure that people would actually want to watch it for the full 2.5 hours. One of our local associations has partnered with their brokers, and they're asking their brokers to take responsibility. I don't know, as an attorney who runs a legal hotline, I will share with you that realtors will do one thing if we ask them to do it. They will follow a rule. If we give realtors a rule, they will follow it. So if you can convince the brokers, look, this is a rule that you must follow, usually they're extremely agreeable and very cooperative. So one of the things I would recommend that I've seen a huge amount of success, and again, this is a smaller board, so this might not work for, the mega boards or even the large boards, but for a small to a medium board where you can pull a list of DRs and you can communicate with them, is it possible, if there is one of these DVDs in your state, that you can give them this DVD and ask them to basically be the responsible person for offering the course? For a lot of brokers, it's not a problem for them to have 2 1.5-hour meetings with their agents. It's not a challenge. And their agents, if they get a call from their broker and say, have you met your ethics requirement? What ethics requirement? Well, the one that you need to make sure you don't get suspended from the Realtor Association. They listen to their brokers, they're happy to attend that meeting. Also, it doesn't have to be an hour and a half. It can be 3 one-hour sessions. You just need to coordinate with the broker to make sure that they have it. Also, it's March, which is a really good thing. Imagine if a broker brought everybody into his office, again, over the next 5 or 6 months, 3 one-hour sessions, and said log into Realtor.org and do the online course. He stands there, they know that there's an accountability here. What I'm basically getting at is think outside the box. One of the things that came up through a work group as they looked to create a toolkit was there are other entities offering this class, but sometimes there can be not the greatest communication between a realtor education provider and a non-realtor education provider, and there can be some issues of communication there. In terms of meeting this and being there for your members, let it go. Let it go. Reach out to the non-realtor education provider. If they're offering this stuff, do they have the right curriculum? Because one of the worst conversations you can ever have with a member is they call you and say, hey, I'm good. I am sending over my certificate. And you've never heard of Harry's Education Factory. And you start to kind of say, I'm not really sure this meets the requirement. Saying to a member who's just spent $25 to achieve that requirement, this doesn't count. You might have the ability, or one of your staff may have the ability, to make a quick phone call. I am sending you a link, or I'm sending you a package of materials. And along those lines, do you have an up-and-coming instructor who's trying to break in? Real estate instructors, you have to be talented in this business to make a living. And sometimes it's really hard to get that experience. Do you have one out there who really wants in, but just can't catch a break? Want to know a secret? Sometimes they will teach for free. Online at Realtor.org in the Code of Ethics materials under Law and Policy, there's a PowerPoint. There's an instructor guide, and there's a participant guide. I used it 6 years ago when I was in a small state, and basically we went across the state, and they looked at me and they said, we need some help. That was the course that we took, we implemented. And what was funny was even though every single slide said NAR with the realtor copyright, people actually thought I wrote this stuff. Because it was that good. It was very topical, it was very modern. So I highly encourage you to look for those kinds of things that don't cost money, but also if your state isn't participating, ask them to help. A state can help simply by, as Richard talked about, communication. Cross-marketing between the local and the state can be absolutely key. A lot of state associations have either a daily, weekly, or monthly communication to members. You put it on the page when you know people are going to open it. I think those are some of the most amazing things that a state can do. I highly encourage you to keep that conversation going. And obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions from the state perspective, but I also want to just acknowledge the National Association staff. They really have gone above and beyond to make sure that we have the resources that we need. And one thing I want you to all leave today, go to Law and Policy, go to the Code of Ethics information section. There is a ton of information there that you can download and basically just steal. And then you have the ability to go ahead and offer this information to your members. Because the other thing is, and no one really touched on this completely, this is a requirement, and to all of us in this room, it's a little bit of a headache. But to the members, these are actually really fun classes. They have a really, really good time talking to each other about the rules that other people are breaking. Because there's nothing more fun than gossip. So I really encourage you to go access that information, offer these classes. And again, if you need help from the state, I would encourage you to call them. We try and work with our locals to make sure they have everything they need, but we also understand this is a high burden for you all to meet, and we want to help. Thank you.